Justin Heminger with Apex Realty Group at Discover Fairbanks here in Fairbanks and North Pole. And we've got Bethany Yoakum here with First Rate Financial again with us today. And we're talking about what it takes to write a yes offer in 2024. We got a lot of things happening with interest rates and markets doing kind of weird things. We wanted to talk about kind of what it's going to take this year to get your offer accepted. So thanks, Bethany, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be back.
Yeah, it took a little bit of time off, had some holiday fun.
And then we all kind of circulated whatever illnesses were going around. I know you and I back and forth between the families.
Yeah, that was nuts.
Battling some things.
Yeah.
So
looking at what it takes to get your offer accepted, kind of the first thing that we had talked about was getting your finances in order, making sure that you're ready to get, that pre-approval process started. So I know that's something that we talk about. It seems like we talk about it all the time, but that is like the best step, or the best first step, whichever it might be. So what are the things that we need as far as getting our finances in lockstep to make us moving forward?
Yeah, so great question. So the first step is to get in contact with a lender. And here in Fairbanks, we're a small community, and Fairbanks loves Fairbanks, right? All the citizens of Fairbanks, we like to see people use Fairbanks people. So using a local lender is important, not just because that's what people like, but there's reason behind it, right? Local lenders understand the local market. Alaska is unique. The homes are unique. The ground we live on is unique. Not very many people live on frozen tundra. And sometimes homes are on frozen ground, that falls, and not all lenders understand that. Some of our foundations are different. And so it's important to deal with people who know what's going on, and they're not living in Florida or in South Carolina, and they are just guessing nope. I just had another realtor today reach out to me from their deal, their lender, big online lender, pulled the plug at the end, right before closing, because they said their investor could not lend on that home because of that foundation. And so he reached out to us and was like, hey, can you save this? Is there anything you could do to make this work? And it all had to do with the foundation. So we're getting to work on that and trying to save the deal for them.
Yeah. And those kind of things happen all the time. For instance, we're just coming out of a cold snap where for 3 weeks we were at 40 to 50 below. Well, during that time, you can't put a septic in the ground. Nobody's going to be digging. So we've had transactions that have been delayed due to not being able to put a septic in the ground. Right. And not too many out-of-state lenders understand, the nuances of real frozen ground.
Real frozen, -50 frozen ground. Yeah.
Yeah. So finding a local lender that you can trust is super important. And that's one of the reasons why we like working with you, Bethany, at First Rate, for sure.
We appreciate it. Moving on, talking about that, using a local lender, but using a local lender is going to help you make the process of getting pre-approved easy, but also secure, right? Easy is not always the best. The cheapest is not always the best. Sometimes you want to work, or not sometimes, but you want to work with somebody that isn't just going to take your application, look at your credit report for 2 seconds and say, yep, you look good. And then once you've put your earnest money up, we'll go over that in a little bit, but once you put your earnest money up, that money's at risk to the seller. If your lender defaults and decides that they messed up somewhere along the way, then that money, your money, is at risk to go because somebody else didn't do their job, right? We take that very seriously. We care very, very much. I want to make sure that I'm looking at your file as if you were my brother or my sister or my mom or my dad, and I want to protect your money. It's my job to do my due diligence up front so that I know that you can close on that home. So not only, do we look at, we know the nuances of Fairbanks in Alaska, but also we do our due diligence. We look at it's not just a pre-qualification. It's not a quick glance and you're like, yeah, go look at homes. It is an in-depth review, fine-tooth comb of your documents, your W-2s, your pay stubs. So you want to make sure that you're working with somebody who is protecting you, right? And is not getting in the way of you writing an offer, and also making sure to protect your money as well. So, you're going to want to start with an application. Then we're going to check your credit, and we're going to look at those documents as quickly as you upload them. You upload your W-2s, bank statements, pay stubs. A lot of people in Alaska that are buying up here are moving here. It's a very transient community as well, especially with the military. So, job offer letters, all those kinds of things that we're looking at. And we'll work on getting your pre-approval as quickly as possible.
Perfect. Yeah, and you touched on a lot of really great things that we're going to get into a little bit later, specifically the earnest money. You know what? Let's just talk about it right now.
Let's dive in.
Let's just do it. So talking about earnest money, that's something that a lot of folks they get on boots on the ground, and then we start talking about earnest money, and then like, well, wait a second, I'm coming to town with a VA loan. I thought I didn't need to have any kind of This is a zero down kind of deal. And we're like, oh no, we actually need a little bit of cash. Not necessarily cash, but we actually need a little bit of money to get this thing going. And, having that initial conversation can be kind of a shock sometimes. So that earnest money is kind of like the buyer's skin in the game in the contract. The seller's putting up their home as their consideration in the contract. The buyer is putting up the earnest money. And typically in our market, we're looking at anything between $2,000 to about 2%, or 2% of the purchase price of the home. And again, a lot of times that can be a shock to some folks, but really
more than what the lower 48 is.
Say again?
Experience. I said our earnest money in Fairbanks is much higher than what the standard is in the lower 48.
For sure.
Yeah, it's a shock.
Because we hear people talking like, well, I've done $500 of earnest money before, or $1,000 of earnest money, but up here it can be pretty significant. I mean, shoot, on a $300,000 home, 2% of that is $6,000. So, it can be.
It's a big chunk of change. Yeah.
But the overall purpose of it is to show that you are a good, serious buyer to get involved with.
Yeah, and put it in with the seller. Okay. I've always explained earnest money to people that have, first-time home buyers that have never done a deal before. If you're seasoned, you know what it is. That's one thing. Earnest money is like your rental deposit, right? When you go into a rental, it's new home. A lot of times they want first month's rent and they want a rental deposit. That rental deposit is yours as long as you take care of the home, right? And there's no damage. So it's your money and you'll get it back, but it is at risk to be lost. And so that's how most people then understand, like, oh, I gotcha. It's my money, but it is at risk. Gotcha.
For sure. And that's another thing. A lot of people think, well, what happens? They ask that question, well, what happens to that money? And it doesn't just disappear. I mean, it definitely goes towards your closing costs.
Exactly. It gets credited. Yeah.
So it definitely gets spent. If there's anything left over, should there be, some of that will get refunded back to you. But yeah, it definitely gets used.
It gets used, and you'll see it itemized on your closing statements and all that stuff for the title company. So you'll see that on all of your loan estimates and closing disclosures that it is getting used and credited for.
Perfect. So now that we've got our pre-approval letter, we've got earnest money, and we're ready. Let's say we've identified the home, we're ready to write an offer. Really, I think the next big important piece is looking at the offer price itself. Historically in our market, we tend to see buyers that will come to town and be like, well, I know that's what the price says, but I'd like to offer, $10,000-$15,000 underneath that. And
are you still seeing that a lot, where people want to offer under?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not as often as we did. I mean, like when we started 5 to 10 years ago. But like it still happens from time to time, and we have to go back and say, hey, look, that's just not what the data is showing, not what sellers are expecting. I mean, looking at our market trend reports going back for years and years and years, the list to sales ratio that sellers have been seeing for years across nearly every price range is like 98 to 101%. Yeah. So majority
you pull those stats all the time. You're keeping a great pulse on the market to advise your clients. If you write it off like this, it's just going to get laughed at. Like, let's not do that,
Right. Like we can have we can have a verbal conversation. Like we can talk with the other realtor and say, hey, this is kind of where we're thinking, but before we go writing up an offer and taking the really serious route of doing this, we may want to have a conversation with them first.
Yeah.
But more often than not, sellers are not getting offers and not accepting offers that are that much lower than what they're asking for. They're getting just about everything that they're asking.
And a lot of that, I mean, it's always dictated by the market, by supply and demand. Well, supply is low, but demand is increasing. So yes, rates were high. They're still higher than what anybody most of the people our age, in your mid-20s to mid-30s have never seen an interest rate above 5%. And now we are, right? And so it's shock. I mean, the recency, everybody's expecting 3%. And so the payment shock of a 7 point or a 6 point, mid-6 interest rate, let's just say 6.75 interest rate, is shocking, right? And it's hard to accept, but people are starting to get over it. Rates are starting to come down, and the feds are working on fighting inflation. And so as interest rates are starting to come down, and they have been since the beginning of the year in January, more people are coming out of the woodwork. Applications are up nationwide. So demand is high, but the supply is still low. And so the competition, I know that when I'm writing offers or pre-approval letters for people when they're writing an offer, I know sometimes I have my clients, I have 2 or 3 clients that are writing an offer on one specific property. Like they are competing. It's out there.
So in writing those competing offers, one of the things that we saw the last time we saw, one of these big pushes was back in 2020 when we had interest rates were a lot lower and inventory was a lot lower too. There was huge competition, but we saw, buyers writing offers asking for, no closing cost credits. Buyers are paying for all of their closing costs and also writing, offers as is, not asking for any kind of repairs. So far, I haven't seen too many buyers that haven't been able to cover their closing cost credits. I'm sorry, that have been able to cover their closing cost credits here recently, or that have not been asking for closing cost credits. And although the competition is definitely up, I don't see it, at least at this point, where a lot of people are asking for the as-is offers yet.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, those as-is offers are kind of scary.
Yeah. I mean, there were
more risk as a buyer.
There were hundreds of them that were negotiated as is during that 2020, 2021 time. And a lot of those homes are going to be turning around, here in the next couple of years. So that's going to be tough.
Yeah, I'm sure some deferred maintenance on those. But once you write an offer, what's your next step? We write the offer, they write the offer, we send over the $5,000 closing guarantee, which for First Rate Financial, what that means is we are guaranteeing our work. Essentially, we're putting a price behind the work that we do. And so in an effort to make your offer more competitive to the seller, we are guaranteeing that we can close on your home. And if for some reason we can't, if there's something that we missed during the pre-approval process, which we've written very few checks, we will give the sellers $5,000 as a guarantee.
And that's pretty huge. That's one of the things that we include along with the offer to show the seller, hey, look, not only are there huge merits within this offer because, we're looking to buy your house,
right,
but, there's guarantees associated with the strength of this offer too.
It's like lender earnest money too, It's like your earnest money and then lender earnest money, So if something were to happen, you're still gonna, hopefully financially be compensated for time you lost on the market, but I haven't had to write one of those yet, for me anyway.
Thinking about moving to Fairbanks? Well, click on the link below for my free relocation guide where I talk about top schools, top neighborhoods, and so much more.
We were talking about closing costs.
Closing costs, yeah. If by chance, if the market continues to shift and more buyers as the interest rates drop, the likelihood of you getting a seller credit is becoming slimmer and slimmer, right? So to prepare for that, in Fairbanks, you're looking at, let's just say that the sellers are not covering really any of your closing costs. You want to plan for about 3%, give or take a little bit, 3% of the purchase price is about where you're going to lie for covering your own closing costs, to include appraisal, title fees, homeowners insurance, taxes, things of that nature. So 3% is a pretty good ballpark for that.
Right. So if you're looking at a $300,000 home, you want to have about $9,000 worth of closing costs ready to go.
Yeah, give or take a little bit on that. Yeah, that's perfect. Just kind of plan and save accordingly.
Yeah. And one of the things that I had said, well, I haven't seen, it's not, at least at this point, I've not seen buyers not getting closing costs covered.
That's
but
amazing.
Yeah. So keep your fingers crossed.
I know, right? I've got a couple come in without it, because I know that they've been, there's like 4 or 5 offers on the property. You don't typically ask for seller credit when you're competing like that. So
For sure. Yeah. If you're in a competing offer situation, you don't want to be putting in a whole lot of extra things to reduce those overall net proceeds.
yeah, for the seller. Yeah. Does that kind of cover it? You want to get pre-approved with the lender that you know has got your back to protect your earnest money. You're going to plan for about 2% earnest money and then about 3% total for closing costs if you don't get the seller credit. What else did we not cover?
I think that's it. All right. Well, we talked about a lot of great things. We talked about getting pre-approved with a really great local lender, writing a good solid offer in terms of offer, the overall offer price and why earnest money is important. And at least at this point, we're not necessarily seeing offers that, aren't getting closing costs covered, but be prepared, to have 2 to 3% set aside for your closing costs later. And then just, be careful writing offers where you're going to take care of your own repairs later. Apart from that, if you ever have any questions, you can reach us at www.fbxhomesearch.com. Give us a call at 907-885-0316. And Bethany's information will also be down in the description below for sure. So check us out, check Bethany out, give us a call. Have a great day.